and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's checked in for a second night at the Overlook Hotel. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
When you check in, you'll never leave. Hello.
Pretty much.
That's a different hotel.
It's another bad hotel.
Yeah.
Don't go near the maze. Also that. So yeah, later in today's show, we're going to do more of these sort of overlooked stories that we sort of have overlooked, possibly, over the last few months. But first, there was some Champions League action last night. It was Toronto hosting Chivas de Guadalajara in the first leg of the Concacaf Champions League final. All MLS fans are excited. This could be the moment. But I don't think it is.
I don't think it is.
They
was
lost
nuts.
2-1.
They did.
They lost 2-1 at home.
2-1 at home, Toronto falling very quickly. The first goal for Chivas coming, in the second minute, I believe. Really hitting home the idea that maybe Toronto, for all of their field work that they did to get the field ready for this game, maybe the players weren't quite up for it or quite prepared for it.
So too much resources focused on the field and not enough on the players.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I did see... Oh, sorry, you told me that in Matt Doyle's review, which is one of our go-to sources, right, for reviewing Major League Soccer team performances, Toronto looked flat. Which is normally a thing that I'm not a fan of using that phrase because usually it's not the correct. There's normally a deeper reason, right?
Yeah.
But we watched the first goal, which came in the second minute for Chivas de Guadalajara, and I think flat is the exact word. Literally feet flat on the floor in some cases.
Yep. Or just barely off the floor in other cases. But yeah, I mean, I think Doyle's point was that it comes off of a throw-in, and when you're conceding, basically to throw in. Taken assist from the throw, so that maybe speaks to everybody not quite being up for it.
Which, I mean, I was ready to say, some goals come from throws sometimes, and as long as it's not a glaringly obvious error, then you can't blame the throw-in. And there was a glaringly obvious error.
All right, let's talk about what that glaringly obvious error was then, Daryl Grove.
So it was Jonathan Osorio, who, if I was organising that Toronto defence, his job would have been... mark the thrower.
Yeah.
So it's Brizuela, right, who's the right back, takes the throw, throws it to Pulido, who gives it him back because no one has marked the thrower. This is one of the basics of soccer defending, right?
Yeah. And I think number one, your point off air was that it looks as though, if people haven't seen it, it looks as though Osorio is marking somebody who's just off camera. But the reality is Brizuela's the right back. He's all the way forward. 4-2-3-1 means unless the right center back is bombing forward, there's really no one for Osorio to worry about. And so it really does then go to this idea of maybe they just kind of weren't thinking Chivas are going to be after it this early. Chivas were after it that early. They pressed early. They sent numbers forward as quickly as possible. And with that came a goal. And
that one too, with Brizuela throwing it to Pulido, who gives it him straight back so Brizuela can go down the line. They almost look like they couldn't believe their luck. They're like, oh... They forgot to man mark on the throw-in.
Because even if Osorio thought, okay, maybe I'm close enough, the reality is he is not goal side. And even if he thought he was close enough, he's not. Because the reason why you put somebody on the thrower is because, number one, as soon as they step in bounds, they're an active player. They can receive that ball right back. Yeah. But also, number two, it's as simple as you definitely can't get too close because I think you can get an infraction called on you. But you can definitely cause some problems to the thrower if you're close enough that maybe they can't follow through on a long throw. Not that that's what was happening here. But even so, you're making them think because there's another person there.
Well, so the classic version of this is the one in front, one behind. Yep. Right? So if I was doing this, I would have asked Osorio to stand in front of Alan Pulido. And then as soon as the ball's in play, then he can go and mark Brizuela, right? You can kind of do one job then the other and just make sure after the guy's thrown the ball you can go and mark him. Osorio does neither, and Brizuela is able to get a low cross in, and that's where the goal comes from.
So it comes from that cross, but then the other key component here, aside from the finish, is the lovely little dummy from Godinez, because I think that also...
I'm not familiar with Godinez.
Nor am I. No.
I'm very impressed by this dummy.
I know he wears number 89. That much I can tell you. And it took some work to do that because the numbers on the Chivas backs, not easy to see.
What did you called them like a magic eye?
They are.
Type thing.
They really are. And those are things that I couldn't... I've never been able to do the... you see the pattern of images, but then there's one image that should come out. Never been able to do that.
It's a sailboat.
And maybe that... See?
Some more rats?
I have indeed. I'm standing here all day until I see it. And I am in a similar boat with the Chivas jerseys. Yeah. Only when Daryl Grove pointed out that the number is also on the shorts, that is when I was able to start figuring out some numbers.
But much smaller.
Yeah,
much smaller.
But
yeah, Godinez, great leave, because he just kind of looked like he's going to go at the ball, but then he just opens his legs, let it run through. It's really, really clever leave. The ball goes through to Pizarro, who finishes first time under not enough pressure from Sauro.
From Auro.
Auro,
yeah,
excuse me.
Yeah, I think Auro. It's basically.
I got confused with Lord of the Rings.
Gaston Sarro is around Major League Soccer.
You give me too much credit.
But I think it was a little bit of a physical battle for Auro that he's kind of backing off. Maybe he just doesn't want to be too aggressive, too handsy, and so because he's backing off and trying not to make too much contact, there's then a little gap that opens up. He tries to close it, but then he's reacting as opposed to being the proactive one. And I think if you'll permit me a random analogy, as I tend to take.
Do I get a veto?
You don't. So much of this Toronto sequence reminded me of when I first started running cross country in high school, which is in the city, you are praying for red lights. And it becomes this sort of like, red light, okay, I can stop now. Oh, there's going to be a red light up there, I'll stop just in case.
Wait, is it still cross country if you're running through the city?
Yeah, you just keep going. Well, then there's alleyways and there's fields and stuff. You just get a variety. What do you want? We have to drive out to the middle of the country and run there?
Yeah. It should be cross city running if it's...
But my point simply was that it was always... at least in the beginning, a sort of an opportunity to take the foot off the gas.
I see.
And here, that's what it felt like. It just felt like Toronto kept being like, oh, it's a throw in. Oh, they threw it in. Oh, we should step. Oh, okay, they're dribbling. Okay, we don't need to. Oh, okay, he's going to get it. Oh, he didn't. It just felt like it was constantly everybody waiting for it to go out for a goal kick or something and not really being aware of, nope, they're still attacking, and now the ball's in the back of the net.
So here's the other thing we noticed about this Toronto performance is it looked like there was a lot of get the ball to Giovinco. He's like an outlet and he'll do something. And he kind of does do something for Toronto's equaliser in the 19th minute. But I think Chivas de Guadalajara came prepared for this game plan. Obviously, if you're playing Toronto, and especially if you're not a Major League Soccer team, the first name you'll look at on the team sheet, with all respect to Josie and Michael Bradley, is Sebastian Giovinco, right? And you'll maybe watch some footage and you'll be like, all right, we got to keep an eye on this guy. What they did is they got number 25. Again, we had to squint, but we saw it. We saw a sailboat and we saw number 25. Michael Perez absolutely man-marked Sebastian Giovinco and, except for that one moment, did an incredible job.
And even, when you say the one moment, you mean in the lead up to this goal?
Yeah.
Because even then, when we watch this a bunch of times, Giovinco does not pass this ball to Josie Altidore. He basically is under so much pressure that he miscontrols it and it rolls to Josie Altidore.
Oh, really?
So even then... it's still
isn't it Delgado who ends up putting the pass through?
It's
Josie involved.
It's Josie plays it to it's Altidore to Delgado to Osorio. For
I see.
The goal.
Sorry, I forgot about Josie's involvement.
Yeah, but it's basically Delgado does the half volley into the feet of Giovinco, who turns, tries to go at the defense, loses control, and it spills to Josie Altidore.
I didn't know that Giovinco was still tackled in this moment and just got lucky.
Yep.
Because what Perez is doing in this moment, he's like hands all over Giovinco. He's kind of always a hand on the shoulder, reaching around, tugging him, putting him off balance, I think. Just you really walking the line, doesn't get any yellow cards through the whole game. And then he's taking weird, not fouls, but swing and a kick to just poke the ball away from Giovinco. And you saw him through the first 20 minutes do that consistently and shut Giovinco down in that way.
Yeah, I mean, we even joke that there's one passage where Giovinco tries to get on the end of a ball, it goes out for a goal kick, and Giovinco kind of slides off the field.
Yeah.
And even then, Perez kind of follows him and still touches him. And I think it's to say hey, are you okay? Because he slid a decent way.
It was,
But it's still he followed him off the field.
But it did seem he had an obsessive compulsive thing where he had to touch Giovinco all the time.
It's before play can resume, you have to tag your partner. That's how that works.
Despite Giovinco's 50-50 involvement in the goal, then I'm not as impressed now. You've told me that he gets kind of tackled. Chivas really shut Giovinco down. And I think if you can do that, you'll often shut Toronto down.
Yep.
Especially if Toronto keep looking for Giovinco.
Especially if they do, and it seems like they did. But it was. Are we going to say a good goal? What would you say this one?
I mean, from a US men's national team perspective, obviously a Canadian, Osorio scores it. I'm really impressed with Marky Delgado's involvement because there's a theme developing of Marky Delgado with the unexpected pass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this one, it's like a weird half volley from right, squeezed out on the touchline that he probably shouldn't have been able to find. And somehow he finds Giovinco with this weird half volley that no one saw coming.
Yeah.
And then even the square ball seems... it's the assist to Osorio once he gets down the sideline. It looks like the wrong ball. It looks like the keeper should get it, and yet it rolls straight through the corridor of uncertainty to Osorio's feet.
Ooh, you use corridor of uncertainty.
I did.
That's unlike you. But I would say
I was in Canada, so I think I can use more British phrases.
Even before that, I would say, though, the fact that it's Delgado starting this play and then semi-finishing it because he runs 60, 70 yards, that's good work from him to get on the end of the ball from Josie Altidore. And I would say it's a really good ball from Josie to split two defenders to put Delgado in.
I remember, I can picture it now. Yes, it is a good ball from jersey. It's almost tempting, right? It's taunting the defender. You think you can get this, you can't. It's going straight past.
And I believe it does. I think somebody tries to make a play on it, and again, that might be why there's a little bit more space for the corridor of uncertainty to be even wider.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, but
what wasn't lovely?
What wasn't lovely is the fact that Toronto lost 2-1 at home. The winning goal in the 72nd minute is from Alan Pulido.
Yep.
It's a free kick that I'm going to say is definitely a cross to the far post to Salcido, the centre-back who was up to attack the free kick. It accidentally goes in the top corner.
It absolutely does.
Right.
And I think emphasize, we talked about this, we had a listener question about how do you know when it was intentional versus not?
Yes.
I would say the way the Chivas players reacted, I forget who was the closest to the ball when it goes in the goal, but he reacts almost as though like, oh, we're getting that called back, right? Like, oh, it's an indirect free kick? Like, that didn't count. Unfortunately, for Toronto fans, it was a direct free kick. But Pulido doesn't even he doesn't run off celebrating the way you would if you just scored the potential winner, the potential tie killer in a final. Yep. He sort of stands there with his arms out, like, "Yep, I did it, I guess."
Oh, sorry, I'm just getting this coming in on my phone. The goal has actually been credited to Harry Kane.
I mean, it's believable. They got to find a way for him to catch Mo Salah somehow.
He's the top scorer in the Concacaf Champions League.
But I think if you were going to give credit to anybody aside from Pulido, you probably have to give it to Alex Bono, as sad as that is.
So you give debit to Alex
yes.
Bono. Yeah, so what does he do? He kind of... I've got a mental memory image of his right hand kind of flapping at it as if he was going to palm it away to the left. And I don't even know if he makes contact with it or not. I don't know if he misses it completely. He certainly doesn't make good contact with it.
No, he does not. I don't think
actually doesn't touch it, does it?
No. The only thing I can think from my very limited goalkeeping experience, so goalkeepers out there, feel free to tell me I'm stupid. That's fine. I've heard worse on Twitter. But I imagine that there's an element of, if I were the goalkeeper there when I played goalkeeper, if there's a free kick coming from that angle as far out as it was on the touchline.
Oh, yeah, it was kind of wide left, by the way, just so
I'm thinking he is not going to be intentionally shooting. So if that ball's coming in, it's going to be a cross. I'm going to position myself accordingly, which is basically what Bono does. And you can see in those first couple steps, it is that cross is coming in and I'm going to command my box and I'm going to come meet it. And I think he takes 2 steps, recognizes, the printer agrees, recognizes, wait a minute, the trajectory on this is weird, and then he's essentially backpedaling. And at that point, he's no longer, again, it's kind of a consistent theme, he's not being proactive and moving to meet the ball. He's sort of trying to react and scramble, and then you've got players all around you, which is going to make it difficult as well to both keep an eye on the ball and read where you are.
Right.
Ball goes in the net.
I think essentially he's shaped to catch a cross, and at the last second he's trying to shape to save a shot, and you're just in the wrong position, your legs are all wrong, and that's why it goes in. I mean, we're not making excuses for Alex Bono. This basically he got this wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you think about it this way, if you have a direct free kick from 30 yards out,
the printer thought it was going to print and then it didn't.
Yeah, see, he tricked us. If you have a direct free kick from 30 yards out that is in an obvious shooting situation, you've got the wall in front of you. You will never see the goalkeeper come charging off the line to try to make the save. The goalkeeper stays rooted and then slides left or right to make the save if need be.
Like a Sabutio goalkeeper.
Exactly. So imagine here, if the goalkeeper comes off a couple steps off the line, that indicates to me he is expecting a cross and looking for a cross, and maybe that is problematic if you're looking for a cross and it's never really considering, or you're never really considering that it could be a shot.
So they've conceded 2 away goals, have Toronto. They lost 2-1. Next week they go away to Chivas de Guadalajara, I believe in Guadalajara.
I believe you're correct.
For the second leg of the Concacaf Champions League final.
It would be weird if it was Los Angeles, but yeah.
It'd be better, but it'd be easier. The 2 away goals is a problem. Away goals, as I understand it, do count in the CONCACAF Champions League. So they'd need to, win 2-1?
Well, that would put them to penalties, I think, is what we've just learned.
Yeah, well, so there's 2-1 would put them to penalties because after away goals, after 90 minutes, there's no extra time in the CONCACAF Champions League. So it'd be straight to penalty kicks. So a 2-1 win would be great. It would get Toronto to penalty kicks. But a 1-0 win, for example, no good.
Nope.
2-0 win, great. Right, and we're doing a lot of very easy mathematical formulations here. The bigger problem is it's just historically hard for Major League Soccer teams to go to Mexico and win. Or at least it used to be.
I mean,
I've still got some measure of optimism, as in I'm not looking at this as an impossible job. Next Wednesday, right? I mean, whereas maybe 2 years ago I would have said, that's that. I'm not even going to watch.
I mean, my assumption is that Toronto maybe expected Chivas to be more cautious and more defensive, with Chivas thinking, we'll go there, we'll kind of try to play for the 0-0, then we'll get one at home, that'll do it. And so maybe Toronto were just a little bit anticipating not as strong of a reaction or not of a strong start from Chivas. So maybe if Toronto can then take that inspiration and take it to Chivas in Mexico, maybe there's still something to play for.
Do you think maybe we'll see Toronto next week just get revved up and just go at it from the get-go?
I'd say there's at least a 6% chance.
Why 6%?
Because I think that was the made-up statistic that's been doing the rounds.
Oh, I am not... No disrespect to the people who make up those statistics, but those statistics do feel very made up,
I mean,
right?
Yeah. 73%, Daryl. 73%.
Of all statistics are made up?
Yep.
Before we move on to do...
I think statisticians out there are like slamming their electronic devices and being very angry with us.
There's a 50% chance of that happening. Before we move on to talk more overlooked stories, today's show is sponsored by, for the final time, for now at least, Fan Futsal. Fan Futsal. If you go to fanfutsal.com, there you will find a fantasy soccer game unlike any other.
All right, let's talk about why it's unlike any other for those who haven't heard us talk about it before.
Okay, so we always say this, and I really mean it, and I really like Fan Futsal for this reason. It is not thinly disguised gambling, which is what most other fantasy soccer games are.
Yes.
Right? This is fantasy soccer for the love of soccer, created by a soccer fan and a Total Soccer Show listener named Dave. Thank you, Dave.
Hey, Dave. I don't know why I feel the need to make this distinction. Not all or not most fantasy apps are gambling, but the ones that tend to advertise on podcasts are definitely thinly veiled gambling.
Well, the ones where you have to pay money to enter and you might win some money based on your results, those are gambling.
Yes.
Fan Futsal is not. It's also different in a different way.
Yeah, and if you want to know why we don't like those services, watch that John Oliver segment. He does a very good job of breaking down the semi-disguised gambling sites.
Yeah. So here's the other reason Fan Futsal is different is it's basically five-a-side, and you're essentially picking teams to play positions. So, for example, you'll pick a team to play in goal for you in a game week. And if your team keeps a clean sheet, say you chose... I always go to Manchester United because I think of... Burnley is a good example, right? If you chose Burnley, and Burnley are playing whoever they're playing, they get a clean sheet, you get 16 points. I looked into the Fan Futsal scoring rules. Goalkeeper, team, clean sheets are where it's at.
I'm not making any comments anymore because you and I sort of ruthlessly mocked West Brom for being like, whoever West Brom are playing, start them at attack because it's going to be goals galore. And then Man United go out and concede the title by losing to West Brom.
Well, that's why you've got to sort of use your knowledge and have a bit of luck when you pick your Fan Futsal team.
Yep. And it seems like in terms of the TSS tournaments that are ongoing, Glenn in the Premier League TSS tournament is having a decent amount of luck, 76 points this past weekend, as is S.J. Lewis, 045, 62 points, and Jay Warnicki, 71 points in the MLS tournaments.
Yeah, there were two concurrent MLS tournaments. And just so people know, the way tournaments work, if you get 32 people in a tournament, it's essentially like a World Cup with a group stage and a knockout round until an eventual champion is crowned. Those tournaments are full, the ones we just mentioned, but you can create your own tournament or just play matches against other fanfutsal.com users throughout the rest of the season, especially in Major League Soccer. You can go and pick an MLS sort of fan futsal team and play against other players doing the same thing at fanfutsal.com.
So thank you again to Fan Futsal for sponsoring today's show. Thank you to Dave for bringing it to our attention and creating it. And thank you to everybody who's choosing to participate. It's a great service, so we urge you all to check it out.
I like to think of it as a Total Soccer Show community type thing, right? Yeah. Created by a listener and with other listeners joining in. Yeah. Okay, so to our overlooked soccer stories. We really had to rush out yesterday to make sure we got to practice. I think we made it on time. Practice started at 8 p.m. I think we got there at 8 p.m.
I think we got there at 8:02, and if you're on time or 2 minutes late, you're late.
That is true.
What do you mean, did you? Don't put that on me.
Only one of us was driving. But we have some stories that we didn't get to yesterday that I'm still excited to talk about, and I'm going to invite you to go first, Taylor. What else have we sort of overlooked in recent weeks that we're going to talk about today?
I think we've kind of overlooked Dortmund, period. Like the situation at Borussia Dortmund.
Because we keep talking about Pulisic?
Well, I think we haven't even really talked about Christian Pulisic that much. If you go back and look at the weekend reviews, we've had him here and there, but generally speaking, I think it's kind of become like either he starts or he gets some minutes. Dortmund haven't looked that good. They've struggled. Maybe they got a 1-1 draw.
Yeah,
but
they're going to finish second or third. They're not going to challenge for the title.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we haven't really been paying as much attention as maybe we would have otherwise, especially if they were still challenging, or especially if they looked like a solid team. And instead, they look like a team who will be without a manager at the end of the season. And
you
that
calling for
is what I'm focusing on.
Peter Stöger?
I think Peter Stöger might be calling for himself to be fired. He was appointed in December on a short-term contract, and it sounds like basically they're just going to let that expire and then pursue other opportunities.
So he was a rescue job for Peter Bosz,
yes.
right?
I think a rescue job, but with an idea that maybe it would be made long-term.
So rescue job / trial period.
Yes, but it sounds like Bild reported that Dortmund would not extend his contract. And it sounds like that decision was made after the 6-0 loss to Bayern Munich. And not just because
I forgot how bad that was.
They were embarrassed 6-0 by Bayern Munich, but more so the decisions he made, starting no holding midfielders against Bayern Munich, who have plenty of central midfielders, was maybe not the best decision. And it sounds like Stöger has a reputation for being very rigid in his approach, and had kind of promised to be less rigid and change things up and try different things based on the opponent. It sounds like he hasn't really done that. So Dortmund haven't been too impressed, nor has Peter Stöger. This is the part that kind of stood out to me. His quote, imagine if somebody asked you about, are you going to keep this job? Do you want to keep the job? His response was, the club has to figure out which adjustments to make, and there are big adjustments to be made, in my opinion. The position of the coach is certainly part of the equation, and it eventually has to be assessed as well. I'm glad and proud to be working here, but my life isn't completely defined by me standing on the sideline at BVB. I've done so many things in my life. I'm a very serene, happy person. End quote. That sounds to me like he is a man who's ready for the door.
Sounds like he's going to start some alternative career. Have you seen my art?
It does seem that way, right?
It's very static.
I'm serene and calm, and also I'm an interior decorator who uses warm colors to make you feel at home. It sounds like the most likely successor to Peter Stöger will be Lucien Favre, however you pronounce that one. He is a 2.5.
That's how Ben Stiller pronounces it.
Yes, Favre. He has a 2.5 million pound release clause from Nice, where he is currently managing. So we shall see.
That's interesting. Okay.
But I think it's just surprising to me, honestly, kind of similar to Bayern Munich struggling sort of to find a permanent manager, that these big clubs who you expect would be huge draws, it seems like you've really got to find the right person who gets the idea and the mentality of the club. Otherwise, you run into problems fairly quickly.
Speaking of Bayern Munich, we talked yesterday about Niko Kovac being announced as the coach for next season. The DFB Pokal, which is the German Cup semi-final results are in. It's going to be Frankfurt, coached by Niko Kovac, playing against Bayern Munich in the final. So Kovac will get sort of a high-profile game against his future employers.
This reminds me of when, I think it was Xherdan Shaqiri was playing for Basel, and he was their star player, and then they drew Bayern Munich in the knockout round after he had already committed to moving to Bayern Munich, and it was sort of I wonder how aggressive he's going to be in this game.
I mean, if I was Kovac, I'd want to win that game desperately, right? As a nice send-off from Eintracht Frankfurt.
Especially since that recruitment did not go over so well with Eintracht Frankfurt. Yeah, I think maybe you want to send them out on a high note.
Also, weird question for you. Timmy Chandler is at Eintracht Frankfurt. Has been playing really well as a sort of right wing-back, as I understand it, but hasn't been involved with the US national team. Probably won't be involved with the US national team going forward, has never been a favourite of anyone for the US national team. So do we watch that final thinking, go on Timmy, US national team player, we want to see you lift a cup? Or are we kind of sort of, the guys who are sort of overseas and somewhat retired from US national team duty, are we just now not sort of super pumped for them to be winning trophies? It's a tough question, right?
It would be hard for me to justify watching an entire game to see a right back who's peripherally involved for the U.S. national team. Yes, I would also say that I believe the 2 times, or at least the 1 time we have specifically watched a Timmy Chandler game to see what he's capable of, he got injured. I think that's happened twice now. So I'm not gonna curse him by making it a third time.
We can do him a favour and not watch Timmy Chandler in the DFB Pokal.
You're welcome, Timothy.
There we go. Okay, you ready for my overlooked story?
Sure.
This is a thing that has sort of been peripherally on my radar, mostly through David Squire's cartoons.
Yep.
And so I finally delved in yesterday morning and read all about it. There is a civil war in Australian soccer. Like a full-on civil war in Australian soccer. And it's Football Federation Australia, which is obviously the governing body. And so the league is the A-League. The A-League teams have essentially said no more to the FFA, the Football Federation Australia. They have demanded that the entire way that the FFA is set up be redone because they just say, we don't trust you to run the game of soccer in Australia.
Oof.
Yeah.
So Okay, let's go more into this then.
I think I've researched it enough. You can ask me any questions you like about what's going on here.
All right, so first of all, what was the David Squires cartoon that made you initially interested?
I can't remember, but it was something about them arguing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't remember the specifics. I'm sorry.
And so I remember that like fans not being particularly pleased with the way World Cup qualifying was going, and it seemed like a lot of that frustration was directed at the Australian Federation as opposed to anything having to do with like the players themselves. Mm-hmm. It sounds like the coach who was appointed was not too popular. So is that part of it, the situation with the national team?
Not especially. Okay. It's more about how the A-League is going.
Okay.
So the A-League launched in 2006 with 8 teams. Mm-hmm. It now has 10 teams 12 years later. But along the way, 3 of the original teams have been replaced, as in like they failed and had to have replacement teams come in. To give you the names, it was Wellington Phoenix came in to replace the New Zealand Knights, Western Sydney replaced Sydney Rovers, and Melbourne City FC replaced Melbourne Victory. Just think in 12 short years, 3 teams basically failed and had to be replaced. There was an expansion team, North Queensland Fury, that came in, couldn't make it work, and then kind of had to disappear again. There's only been one successful expansion team, Gold Coast United. You compare that to what's happening in Major League Soccer right now. For all our complaints, like it's not as if Atlanta United are failing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So why is this the Federation's fault, though?
Because they are. It seems that they are chiefly involved in running the whole thing, right? Like the A-League is not like a different entity in the way that Major League Soccer is, because the A-League is not single entity. There's no pro rel, but it's not single entity. And the biggest complaint that the clubs seem to have. So just to give you more of the backstory. Average attendance in the A-League is 10,699. So there's not a lot of people attending games. There are a lot of teams that are getting like 7,000-8,000 a game. It's just not looking good. The biggest complaint of the teams is the way that the FFA, the Football Federation, is set up. It's kind of like a council, and you get sort of representatives from each state or territory, which I think is more or less the same thing in Australia. You get sort of 8 seats, I think, 1 for each of the provinces and states and territories, and only 1 seat representing the A-League. So essentially, the A-League teams are saying, we don't have enough say in how this game is being run. We think they're running it incorrectly. They've asked FIFA to come in, take a look, and restructure Australian football.
But again, and I know that like this is not, you don't have a PhD in this. You've done some reading, but like
I've got a master's.
Do you have an idea? Do you have an idea what the grievances are, though? Because again, that sounds to me like clubs, from an outsider, I'm not saying this is it, but like maybe a little bit of devil's advocate and a little bit of outsider combined. It sounds like clubs aren't succeeding, and so they're mad at the Federation, when it's like, couldn't they be making moves to make themselves more profitable by getting better players so you get more people in the stands, so you get more sponsorships? Like, why do you think it's the Federation's fault? I
don't have the specifics, but I do know there are certain rules and restrictions placed on the teams and the players that are Football Federation Australia rules, and it's things like you still have to report for national. You have to report for national team duty for like these training camps, even when there's no game. So like A-League teams will lose their players. That's one example. They'll lose their players for these camps while games are ongoing. So that's one example that I read. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but I don't have more specific details for you.
So it sounds essentially, to put it in the American context, as if like U.S. soccer basically just took Major League Soccer for granted and said, you'll do whatever we say whenever we want, and we're not actually going to help you that much in terms of developing your league as a whole, but we are going to use you for marketing and branding and
what it sounds
player
like.
development purposes.
And the big thing right now is that there are a lot of new teams that want to form and be teams and get a license, and they want to expand the league. But everybody agrees that right now, this thing's been going on for like a year or 2 years. That it's in such disarray, they can't even accept expansion teams, and the whole thing is in limbo as they try and figure it out. So here's the way that the story is beginning to resolve as of early this month. FIFA have sent in a Congress review working group. Congress is the meeting of Football Federation Australia, where all the sort of the council meets, essentially, right? The Congress, I guess, is the thing. So FIFA's review working group is going to be chaired by an independent person. They're all going to sort of submit proposals from various sides, and then essentially FIFA will decide how the Football Federation of Australia should be run going forward. So at the end of the summer, they're going to give their sort of FIFA will say, here's what Australia needs to do. And then September, it will be approved, or we just carry on with the civil war in Australia.
So my question then is, when do they have a large-scale fight at a German airport?
What?
Civil War, man. Captain America.
Oh. Was that a German airport?
I think it was.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that proved that the way to resolve civil war is to have a dramatic fight and then everybody is friends afterwards for some reason.
I don't think that's how civil war ends.
Are they all? I guess not. They're all fractured at the end.
Yeah, they're not. It's not made up at the end.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, you need a refresh before you see Infinity War.
That's probably true.
So there you go. That's as much information as I have. I think it's kind of fascinating, but I would love to learn more. If we have any Australian listeners or people who are familiar with what's going on, I'd love to know what the A-League club's complaints are with the FFA and if there is an obvious resolution that everybody's just refusing to grasp.
All right. Well, one thing that I think I've overlooked kind of consistently because I just assumed Juventus were going to win the title in Italy was Napoli. And I don't even mean there's no this is kind of harsh, but there's no interesting narrative here for me. It's mostly just that I have completely overlooked what Napoli have been doing. We've talked about a little bit, I think at various points we've discussed how Dries Mertens is now a center forward as opposed to a wide player. But really I think it's just sort of we tend to think Juventus have it wrapped up. Some clubs are spending money. Oh, Roma have made the Champions League semifinal. But I don't think we really watch Serie A the way that a lot of people do and would probably like us to.
I think if you want to apologize, you should say sorry.
Oh, well, there we go. We'll start there. Maurizio Sarri, the manager of Napoli for now. And he is one who I've been reading about lots of different managers, as my final overlooked thing will indicate. He is one that I hear him being linked with Premier League jobs, specifically with Chelsea. And that does seem likely because he is a very demanding, but it seems like beloved manager. Has the kind of Italian tactical background that I feel like Antonio Conte has already brought to Chelsea, but more importantly, brings the exciting, attacking, aggressive, high-pressure, highly entertaining soccer that I think Roman Abramovich will want in Chelsea's next manager.
So I've looked at some videos breaking down how Napoli play, and the thing I remember learning from that video is that they do lots and lots and lots of short passing. You
Triangles,
always
man.
see, Napoli players, and then they'll always have 1, 2 or 3 options really close to them. So you don't see a lot of big cross-field balls like you do with, say, Wolves or Man City, like we talked about yesterday. But you'll see lots of short passing options. Like a Napoli rondo, a 5v2 Napoli training session must be an absolute joy to watch.
I like to think that they just set up in triangles, and that's all they do is just pass in that triangle to get used to the pattern. Yeah, I mean, and it's all over the field.
They do 3v1, so keep it tight.
So usually in a 4-3-3, so even their 2 center backs, Koulibaly and Raul Albiol, with ahead of them Jorginho, the kind of holding midfielder. That 3 right there,
He's the converted Italian, right?
Brazilian, I believe.
I think he's played for the Italian national team. He's planning to play at the World Cup. He's going to have a bad summer.
That could be. But he, those 3 right there, even sometimes you wouldn't expect your 2 center backs and your holding midfielder to be the ones who are passing the ball in a triangle. They do that very often. They pull the opposition forward. They make them chase the ball. That opens up opportunities in behind for the attacking 3 that I've come to know very well from watching their highlights of Insigne, Dries Mertens, and Jose Callejon. Very, very pacey, exciting. But again, as you said, also very much emphasizing short passing, creating overloads, causing problems for defenses. Napoli, a very exciting team to watch.
And I think we have mentioned it on the show before, but the idea of Dries Mertens, this Hazard-ish winger, for many, many years, suddenly being told, hey, you're a striker now. And he's like, all right. And he just scores a bunch of goals.
Yep.
Is a great story.
Yeah.
I really love the idea of unlocking the potential of someone by moving their position. I feel like you don't see it that often.
We'll talk more about that later on with my final overlooked point. But yes, so it will be interesting because it does feel like Napoli are destined to constantly finish top 4, but maybe not necessarily be able to knock Juventus off their perch. It does make me wonder if maybe Sarri has been there since I think 2015. So maybe if Chelsea come calling, will he go? That said, he's got a little bit of baggage of his own. He was accused of making homophobic remarks by Roberto Mancini. I think he called him some names. He also had to apologize for sexist comments he made to a journalist. He also apparently smokes on the sidelines. So he brings some interesting...
I think that's the least of his sins is the smoking.
I would say so. But he still brings some interesting beliefs and practices and overall behaviors with him when he goes.
By interesting, you mean despicable?
Yes.
There we go. So I do know it's Juventus versus Napoli this weekend. So if Napoli are going to turn it around and win the title, because they are either 4 or 6 points behind Juventus right now.
I think.
They're 6 points behind. They kind of have to win that game away to Juve. How about this? How about we watch some Serie A this weekend? We'll watch Juve versus Napoli.
I like that idea.
And see what happens in that game.
I also like the idea of clarifying for people who don't know, interesting in my house means bad.
Interesting has quotation marks around it when you say it.
Yeah, whenever behavior is interesting, it's troubling. So we shall see what Napoli do this weekend and beyond. But that was definitely one that I think maybe we did not give enough attention to.
Are you ready for my next one? Okay, so I forgot that we were taking turns going back and forth, but I like the contrast between what's happening in Australia and for all the doom and gloom and things to complain about in American soccer, there has been growth and investment in the past few months.
Okay.
We haven't really talked about it. One thing that happened is the Real Salt Lake Academy opened. It's a $78 million facility called the Zions Bank Real Academy. Happy to use the sponsor name because I think that's what is going to help pay for a lot of American soccer going forward. It is a development academy for Real Salt Lake. They used to sort of outsource it to somewhere in Arizona, but now they've built this gigantic facility sort of in-house. It's a development academy with 8 fields and a charter school. It's in Harriman, Utah. It also has training centers for boys aged 7 to 14 all around Utah and in Arizona. So if you can think of that as a sort of not a pyramid, but a system where you've got lots of satellite training centers so you can be everywhere sort of, I mean, one, delivering soccer to the masses, but also picking out the very best players and being like, you should maybe come to the academy. And this is how Real Salt Lake are going to have the next generation of players.
It'd be interesting if Phoenix Rising ever get MLS status as to how they'll feel about RSL having their established training and development centers in that state.
It is weird, right? There's a weird Utah-Arizona connection. The other part of this is that the old place where they used to have their academy is now the Barcelona, as in Barcelona, the famous Barcelona. Barcelona Academy is in Casa Grande, Arizona, at Grande Sports World. So Real Salt Lake moving out has allowed another sort of well-funded, shall we say, development academy to take root in American soccer. How about that? The other part of this Real Salt Lake investment is the Utah Royals. So we've mentioned this briefly before, right? Utah Royals, they moved, basically the team moved from Kansas where things were not going well to Utah. They recently sold out their first game. I think they played Chicago Red Stars. They lost 1-0. I don't think they've won a game this season through the first 3 games. 19,203 fans turned up to watch the Utah Royals. That's a really good crowd in the NWSL.
It is, and I think, again, I don't mean to kick Kansas City fans when they're down, but when we were talking yesterday about Kristen Press and how players had maybe requested some moves, I think Kelly O'Hara and it's not surprising given that Kansas City FC or FC Kansas City, I forget which one it was, went on to fold and have to be relocated or at least just relocate. So I think for some of those players to go from that situation to suddenly a club where they have really nice training facilities, a really nice locker room, they're being well received by the fans, it's definitely a very strong positive step in the right direction. I'm
pretty confident in saying that it's the same ownership group that owns Real Salt Lake owns the Utah Royals. And there's no official link because we don't do an MLS NWSL official link, but it is the same ownership group.
There we are.
Okay, and you just kicked Kansas while they were down a little bit, but the second part of this sort of positive story about investment in American soccer is happening in Kansas.
There we go.
It's the Pinnacle National Development Center. It opened, I don't have the date, but it opened not too long ago. It's a $75 million development, and it's a permanent national home for the education of coaches and referees.
I'm assuming both times that's dollars, right? $75 million?
Yes. Am I just saying 75 million?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, obviously dollars, American dollars.
I don't know. I don't know if that was your cheeky way of not knowing exactly what the currency was. I've done that before. 75 million transfer fee.
75 million American dollars. So yeah, a permanent home for national coaching. Like if you're doing a high-level coaching license, you now go to Kansas to the Pinnacle National Development Center. I genuinely don't know if Pinnacle a sponsor or if it's just like Pinnacle as in this is the best, so that's what we're naming it. 5 fields with what they're calling a coaching pavilion in the middle. So imagine this, it's a 2-story building, and when you're on the top floor, you overlook the various fields. So you can sort of be up there and you can watch other coaches running a session. So you can sort of, the instructors can assess and watch coaches, or other people can be shown, hey, watch this coach, watch how he's doing it. So really simple, but really, I think, effective innovation.
Yes.
The reason this is so good is apparently in the past, when you were doing coaching badges through US Soccer, you would have training fields. They would rent a field somewhere and they would go and do it. But then like the classroom part of it would have to be somewhere else in some other facility. And then all the other, like the technology and stuff would be somewhere else. It is now all under one roof. So you've got a real focus when people go to do their coaching education.
That seems like a problem that could have been very easily solved. Because like when I got my C license, like we had fields in a facility right next to each other. So it seems like maybe they were like, oh, we can't get the state-of-the-art facilities we want. I'm not sure why that would have been necessarily essential.
Because not everybody can do this everywhere, right? But now US Soccer just has a place where they say, this is where we do the coaching, right? It's all in-house. It's all stored under one roof.
Okay.
Yeah?
I suppose.
Are you not as excited as I am about this?
I mean, we've talked about it before. I'm excited about it. It still seems a little strange to be like, we need this one facility because we couldn't put fields in the same place we could put a classroom. Like, yes, you can. They have that. That is a thing.
But before there wasn't a place where a sort of US Soccer could say, all right, all the time, this is where we do the thing. You know what I mean? Now there's a central, I mean, Kansas is pretty central to the country. Now everybody goes into Kansas and does it.
I guess, honestly, yeah, then I think maybe that is it for me, is that while I like the idea of having a central facility, it is still 1,500 miles away from a lot of places.
Right.
So you do run into that same issue of if you want to get your advanced licenses, you're going to have to spend some money and travel a distance and be there for a while.
I guess that is true.
Yeah. So that's the only downside. I did want to add, though, some people have asked about this before. This is not the groundwork for a like national stadium. There's not going to be like a U.S. Soccer specific stadium in Kansas City at any point that we know of, at least.
There was some confusion when it was announced, right? Yeah, this is really a coaching and referee education center, so they centralize all that stuff, which is, exciting, but not in the way that you're talking about.
Yeah, probably not.
Fair enough.
Final thing that is exciting in the way that I'm talking about, I guess, is Domenico Tedesco. And this was my final thing that I feel like we overlooked a little bit, was just the man himself. We've talked about Schalke plenty.
Have all three of you been coaches?
Today, yes.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, basically.
I like it. Okay.
I mean, because that's kind of where I've been interested, at least in the past couple of days. There's a really good article in The Independent by Archie Rintut, who
Not familiar with his work.
Who goes into depth about Tedesco himself, and he is a very fascinating individual. A few things for you. Top of his class when he got his coaching badges. Do you know who was behind him? Julian Nagelsmann finished behind him. They took them together. Domenico Tedesco speaks 5 languages. I'm glad you cracked yourself up with your Peter Vermees comment. He has a bachelor's degree in business engineering, a master's in innovation management, and worked in project development at Mercedes. He has no soccer background up until a couple years ago. He is not a former player. He didn't come through the ranks of some club. He basically decided he wanted to go into coaching. He started coaching at youth level. His first gig, he basically started 9 years ago at Stuttgart and Hoffenheim academies. His first senior gig, this is the part that blew my mind, was March 8th of 2017 with Erzgebirge Aue, I think how you pronounce that one. Relegation threatened in 2 Bundesliga. In the final 11 games, he got them 20 points, steered them to safety, and the folks at Schalke were like, yeah, that'll do. Let's take a gamble.
It's a big risk from Schalke.
He was appointed March 8th. 93 days later, he's appointed manager of Schalke. And it hasn't really gone that poorly. They were eliminated today, as you said. But
wait, what's the 93 days?
93 days from when he was appointed manager of Erzgebirge Aue, their first club that he's ever coached as a senior at senior level.
No way.
93 days later, he became Schalke's manager. Yeah.
If I didn't know you better, I would say you've made a huge error in your research.
You would think so.
I trust you, and that is amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, and this is a Schalke team that finished last season 6 points from the relegation playoff spot, 19 away from Hoffenheim, who finished in 4th place. At this point, Schalke seem very likely to make the Champions League next season.
They're second right now.
Yeah, and I mean, and you look at who they already know they're going to lose. It's Leon Goretzka and it's Max Meyer at the end of the season.
Max Meyer?
Yep.
Where's he going?
I think he's on this similar situation to Goretzka. I'm not sure it's confirmed yet, but I believe he's out of contract. So he can also walk and go wherever he wants.
Both of those things are good news for Weston McKennie because they both play his position.
That's kind of it. Yeah. But I feel like Tedesco has kind of already proven that he can take parts that maybe didn't fit elsewhere. Naldo specifically was a player who had tons of starts, but it seemed to have fallen by the wayside. Didn't seem like he fit into other managers' plans. Suddenly, he's a pivotal part of this team, scoring free kick goals, and it's because Tedesco sort of looked at him, thought of him as a key player, and built around him. Naldo, kind of slow, a little bit advanced in age, so we'll go back 3. That gives him some cover, and it's worked tremendously for Schalke. So little innovations like that.
The other one I look at is Daniel Caligiuri, who I think was...
Same exact situation.
No one really thought much about him either way.
Yeah.
I think he's 27 or so, and he was just like some so-so player. He's become like the right wing back in the Bundesliga this season. He's been absolutely killing it. I've noticed him every time I've watched Schalke, admittedly for McKennie, Caligiuri catches my eye. Yeah. If you watch that Konoplyanka goal from the weekend as well, Caligiuri's role in that is very, very impressive.
And I think I'm past the point, more or less, of automatically checking to see if Caligiuri is related to Paul Caligiuri.
He is not.
Not.
He absolutely is not.
No.
One other thing I want to say about Schalke as well is I think it's probably a good time to get on the Schalke bandwagon, because even though Pulisic is the big name American player in the Bundesliga, there are so many young Americans in the Schalke sort of U19 system. You're definitely going to see some of them break through in the near future, right? Like maybe I wouldn't be surprised if we see Nick Tatagui maybe next season. It might be too late this year because I know he's coming back from injury and all that. Zian Jones. I think there's definitely some players I'm missing as well.
Haji Wright. I think Hanif is there as well. I'm not sure if he has.
There'll definitely be more young Americans coming through at Schalke in the near future.
Yeah. And so with all of that in mind, I would say I think part of the reason why I was maybe a little bit more focused on managers than anything else is because I've kind of recently been obsessed with the idea of that we look at the way the Premier League hires people, and it's always the same managers. You kind of expect them to do a job for a season or two. You fire them, you get in somebody who's pretty similar.
Tony Pulis, David Moyes,
and then you look at the people. You look at the people in Germany, Tedesco and Julian Nagelsmann, who are very young, who clubs took gambles on, and I think these are the guys who will be managing bigger clubs down the road. And it's the Bundesliga, and I would say it's kind of the Europa League. Are opportunities where young managers or less known managers can sort of show, oh look, like he's doing this thing that's a really interesting tactical innovation, or he's doing this thing with this club that shouldn't, by rights, be in the Europa League semifinals or quarterfinals or what have you. And those are the names that I feel like will make waves down the road. Speaking
of, we've overlooked the Europa League
100%
this season. There's an Arsenal Atletico semi-final. Atletico Madrid. That's going to be worth watching. I think we'll end up watching the Europa League final. Right?
I think we should be for the reason I mentioned, and then for that reason as well, that you've still got very exciting teams in there, and also Arsenal.
I saw that joke coming and it still worked for me.
So that's it for me. That's everything I feel like I've overlooked. I'm sure there's much, much more I've overlooked, but those are the ones that I had time to delve into a bit more.
My final one is the mysterious £25 billion bid for some FIFA action. So this was last month. Gianni Infantino was before FIFA Congress, and he sort of put this proposal in front of everybody. He said, there's a group of investors from Saudi Arabia, China and America. I can't give you any more information because of a non-disclosure agreement. But they've offered us $25 billion for a 12-year deal for the rights to a 24-team Club World Cup. So the Club World Cup is the thing that happens like in December or so right now, and then the European teams win it. And it's sort of not that exciting, right?
I think the official slogan of the Club World Cup is, the Club World Cup.
Oh, yeah, that's happening, right? So it's normally like 7 teams, and it plays out, and the European team wins it.
Exactly. That's a big part of it. Yeah.
What they're planning right now is apparently a 24-team Club World Cup that would possibly take place in the summer, the year before an actual World Cup. So instead of the Confederations Cup being the test run for the World Cup stadia, they would have a Club World Cup. So imagine the 24 best club teams in the world, where you get multiple European teams, multiple South American teams. You might even get an MLS team if it extends the Concacaf thing enough. They're going to have this whole other tournament that's like a big showpiece. So that's part of the proposal. The other part that they would get the rights
real quick, when would the theoretical date be on that?
2021.
But sometime in the summer, right?
Yeah.
So either at an inconvenient time in relation to when the season ends, or during preseason, and it becomes a preseason tournament?
I mean, it would be sort of the same time as a World Cup is, right? So you would. Those clubs would be asked to treat it in the same way. All right, don't get into the saying why it doesn't work stuff, because the other part of this bid is for the Global Nations League. So do you remember our whole UEFA Nations League, Concacaf Champions League conversation? I feel like I'm a lot more pro the idea. I can't explain it right now. Like maybe go back and listen to the 2 shows we did.
I think we should relitigate it right now. Let's do it.
Well, essentially, this looks.
I don't want to do that. I'm kidding.
This looks like FIFA and these mysterious bidders are already thinking, I think this is going to be a big deal, where national teams play in this big global league, and they want to have this top tier of it that this group wants to have the rights to. So the reason I find this an overlooked and interesting story is, one, both of these new things would, I think, be really interesting to watch. Like we can another time debate the pros and cons of whether there should be a club team World Cup during the summer or a global nations league. But two, it's interesting because I've never seen this before with FIFA, right? Normally it's just FIFA create a tournament, then they sell ads, that they get Coca-Cola to be the official fizzy drink provider or whatever. I've never before seen an outside group who are not allowed to be named come in and say, here's 25 billion up front that you can like put in the FIFA coffers and spread around the FIFA members, but you've got to give us a big chunk of the action. It's weird.
With that in mind, well, that's the thing is like, you, Dale Grove, when it comes to stories like this, I feel like tend to be skeptical and a little bit like, who is this shady organization? What are they doing? Why do they want to do that? So you seem excited by that, but you don't seem to be concerned at all that there's this weird conglomerate who's coming together to say, we'll give you money, but we want stuff.
Yeah, here's my 50-50 thing on it. I like the idea of both of these tournaments because I'm all into sort of new tournaments. I'm really excited for new tournaments because it keeps things interesting. I like to see new things tried, like the Nations League stuff. And I think the Club World Cup definitely needs some revamping, right, to make it, to hold people's interest. So I'm pro that. And if it was just FIFA saying we're going to do this, I'd be all into it. But I'm not so pro mysterious organizations buying things for 25 billion.
Did you say USA, Saudi Arabia, China?
Yeah.
Okay. What have they ever done wrong?
So who knows? But that is definitely a story to keep an eye on. So essentially, Infantino put that proposal in front of people at FIFA, and they all said, "Well, who are the people? We're not going to say yes to this if you can't tell us who it is." But it's definitely a story then to keep an eye on in the future, because either this comes back with actual names attached to the investors, then we can have a proper talk about it, or FIFA just go forward with these ideas in their own right.
Thank goodness they're a nonprofit, huh? What, 25 billion? Sure, why not? Oh, goodness gracious. Any other things that you feel like we've overlooked, Daryl?
I mean, yes, but not anything that I've researched.
All right. Well, as I said in the show notes yesterday, I think we'll have more shows like this as the season winds down, wraps up, because there's lots of other stuff going on, lots of interesting pieces of news. But here's two right away. We've already done two shows about things we've overlooked.
I really like this idea because it means it doesn't have to be like news from yesterday that we're suddenly talking about. It can just be a collection of news things from the last few months that we didn't give any attention to, but we kind of want to talk about anyway. So, yeah, maybe a sort of semi-regular doing of this. That's not the correct. That's not very grammatically correct. And would be good for the show, good for us, good for our listeners. And
we'll try to do more than coaches and bureaucracy and infrastructure.
I'm all about anything with a big number attached to it.
Okay, gotcha. Well, we have many scouts to get to, which I think constitutes a big number.
Ooh, some young Americans to start.
Indeed. First up is Chris Fujimoto, scouting Jonathan Amon. Did I say scouting? I think I just said scouting.
You did.
Scouting Jonathan Amon.
People knew what you meant.
The 18-year-old American winger for FC Nordsjælland. I can get Nordsjælland, but not scouting, apparently. Jonathan Amon was reportedly suffering tibia bone stress that he tried to play through in the winter and now has not played since February. I'm assuming those two things are connected. In additional potentially bad news, FIFA is investigating FCN for possibly breaching regulations in how they handled signing Amon, which FCN have so far denied.
So I think I know the story to this. FC Nordsjælland signed him from is it Danish? From a Danish sort of elite sports school type thing that Jonathan Amon was at. And he'd been recruited to that elite sports school through a coach in, I can't remember if it was Georgia or South Carolina. I think it was South Carolina. This is why Amon's American. There was a Danish coach that was there that spotted him and said, "Hey, you should come to this this special Professor X sports school that we've got in Denmark."
But why would that be a problem?
I don't know.
So you're just saying you just remember the story of how
I remember the story of how he got there.
Gotcha.
I don't know what the problem would be. Maybe because you're not supposed to just get teenagers and tell them to come to school in Denmark.
Yeah,
that would be my guess.
That could be. I mean, I wonder if there's some. This is complete speculation, but given that he is currently 18, I wonder if there was some sort of we'll get you to this academy and park you there until you turn 18, and then you can sign with Nordsjælland.
Yep. That sounds about right.
There we go.
Okay,
right.
So
solved. Done.
Not quite. Daniel Gaither is scouting DeSavio Payne, the 22-year-old American right back for Excelsior Rotterdam. The good news is that Danielle is pretty sure DeSavio hasn't conceded a penalty since her last report. That's because that's what happened last time. The bad news is that he's injured again. No details on what kind of injury or a return date. I think I would crown DeSavio Payne the most stop-start player in the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network.
I think Junior Flores would like a word with you.
No, he's been stop-stop.
He's just been stop. You're right. He's been stop, injured, stop again. Mason Cray is scouting Marco Farfan, the 19-year-old American left back for the Portland Timbers. Marco Farfan has had 2 substitute appearances in the waning minutes of the last 2 games. Mason concludes that while he hasn't been starting, it seems like a good sign that Savarese is subbing a left back on.
All right, let's keep grasping at Marco Farfan straws.
There we go.
Thank you, Mason. Brian Heuser is scouting Sergino Dest, the 17-year-old American right-back for Ajax U19s. Brian says, Sergino Dest went the full 90 and scored the 4th goal in Ajax U19's 6-2 win over Vitesse U19s, a result which kept the PSV U19s at the top of the table. What they got to do with it? So, did he mean the Ajax U19s or...
It must have been I think it was Ajax U19s. Maybe that was a typo.
His goal was from long range and came after Sergino Dest, had missed the previous game due to a red card suspension. Interestingly, Instagram indicated that he hung out with fellow American Zian Jones over the weekend, that his red card forced him to miss the match.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, Elijah Bates is scouting Zian Jones, the 17-year-old American forward for Schalke, and Daryl's dreams for the future. Mm-hmm. Jones is still training with Schalke and was recently seen hanging out with Corey Gibbs, the senior director of the Wasserman Media Group, and with Weston McKennie. So apparently also Sergio Dest. He just doesn't make the list in this case.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Oh, and just so people understand, that was senior director of Wasserman Media Group was in parentheses. Corey Gibbs, former US men's national team defender, is with Wasserman Media Group.
Yep.
Yeah. Zach Lippert is scouting Alejandro Guido, the 24-year-old American midfielder for Club Tijuana. Zach says Guido has found minutes hard to come by since getting 2 yellow cards in 90 seconds last month against Tigres. In Club Tijuana's last 4 games, he has only made 1 appearance and didn't make the matchday squad in the other 3. Mm-hmm. Chin up, Alejandro, chin up.
And yellow cards down?
Yeah.
Out. Russell Varner scouting Hugo Arellano, the 20-year-old American defender for Los Dos. Hugo Arellano started his 2nd consecutive week following his 3-game suspension and looked far more comfortable in defense this past weekend against St. Louis FC. Paired with Thomas Hilliard Arce, Arellano's positioning was solid and he showed far more energy than in his last performance. Los Dos is still looking for their first win of the year, but Arellano and his defense are not to blame for their poor start, says Russell.
Yeah. Thank you, Russell, for the recent iTunes review. There was a Russell V gave us an iTunes review. I'm pretty sure that might have been Russell.
Mm-hmm. Was it all about Hugo Arellano? Because if so, then it probably was.
Shane Thomas is scouting Justin Kluivert, the 18-year-old Dutch left winger at Ajax. Shane says Justin Kluivert is currently on great form and continues to start consistently for Ajax. He has 2 goals in the last 5 games, both of which came off crosses. Basically, his pace allows him to get 2 balls before defenders, while his skill allows him to keep the ball from and beat those same defenders, thereby allowing him to get in a shot or a cross, which I think is a good way of saying he's basically very, very good at soccer.
That checks out. Ryan Marzak scouting Josh Onoma, the 20-year-old English midfielder / English Modric, on loan at Aston Villa from Tottenham. I beat you to it this time. The English Modric started again for Aston Villa this weekend in a 1-0 victory over Leeds. I'm sure Leeds' owner complained about it, which helped Villa earn at least a berth in the championship playoffs. Josh controlled the midfield and had a few key passes to trigger attacks. Yeah, that sounds just like Josh Onoma. Ryan Marzak is also scouting Pione Sisto, the 23-year-old Danish attacker for Celta Vigo. Ryan says Pione Sisto still has the 2nd most assists in La Liga this season, even though he still has not recorded one in 2018. However, he continues to be a menace down the left flank, and it's only a matter of time until he earns his nickname back. Celta have 2 huge matchups this week, at home against Barcelona and then Valencia. Mm-hmm. Daryl, if you wouldn't mind, will you read the next one as well from Todd Ito? Because I know it's coming and I'm excited for you to read it.
In this report?
Yes.
Todd Ito is scouting Takafusa Kubo, the 16-year-old Japanese attacker for FC Tokyo. I haven't read ahead, so I don't know why Taylor's so excited.
It made me laugh.
Todd says that Kubo saw his first action for FC Tokyo since March 10th, coming on as a sub in Tokyo's 1-0 loss to Cerezo Osaka. Todd wasn't able to find much information on Kubo's performance, except for a French J-League fan's Twitter account. The Google translated tweet made clear that, quote, Takafusa Kubo entered earlier, which lays Yannick on a kidney stroke. The indented centre is out, always 1-0, unquote. Make of that what you will, but Todd says he now has a new way to close emails. Indented centre is out, always 1-0, so that's cool. It certainly is.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you also to John Youngblood, scouting Rio Griffiths, the 17-year-old English striker for Tottenham. After a substitute appearance with the U23s, Rio returned to the Spurs U18s, captaining them in a 5-3 loss to Norwich. Rio scored his third hat-trick of the campaign, and his third goal, a 22-yard strike to the top corner, was the pick of the bunch.
John Youngblood is scouting Rio Griffiths, and you've just read that one. So Jeff Warren is scouting Niklas Dorsch. Jeff Warren scouting Niklas Dorsch, the 20-year-old midfielder for Bayern Munich 2. Jeff says Dorsch notched his second goal of the season, a 3-0 win away at Regionalliga opponent Buchbach. The Bayern 2 captain recently rejected a contract extension and is reportedly upset with Bayern signings of yet another midfielder in Leon Goretzka from Schalke. Dorsch may soon be looking for first-team opportunities elsewhere.
He could go to Schalke. They could just do a little swap deal. I'm not sure if Weston McKennie would love that. We read Will Hurson's report about Ryan Sessegnon yesterday. Yes. Should we do it again, or should we skip to our final one?
Well, let's just remind everybody that Ryan Sessegnon is the championship player of the season. How about that, Ryan Sessegnon?
And shockingly, was also in the championship team of the season.
Yes.
Who'd have thunk? John Youngblood again, final scouting report of the day, scouting Tashan Oakley-Booth, the 18-year-old English midfielder for Tottenham. Tashan went the full 90 in young Spurs' 2-1 victory over Chelsea in the Premier League 2. Tottenham went down 1-0 and had a player sent off, meaning that Oakley-Booth had to take command of the midfield to earn that victory.
Part of me now wants all these Premier League 2 teams to have new and exciting names. So at least like in the Dutch league, you've got young Ajax and young PSV. Instead of just being sort of like Tottenham U23s, I want them to be like young Spurs or the Spursettes or the Spursinhos. Or
While we're doing that, can we also call it like the Junior Premier League or something? Because you're absolutely right when it's like Tottenham 2 beat Chelsea 2 in the Premier League 2. It's a lot of 2s in there.
Yeah, it's too many.
Yeah.
Maybe DOS?
Yeah.
Finally get some Spanish language into England.
DOS Premier League? Premier League DOS?
We'll work on it. We'll work on it. Taylor Rockwell.
Yes, sir.
So thank you to everybody for today's Scouting Reports. I'll jump to the end too soon.
I am everybody.
If you would like to support the Total Soccer Show, join the Scouting Network. It is totalsoccershow.com/join. All the information will be there. I know there are people who are waiting for their scouting assignments. I've received emails over the last week or 10 days. I finally do have time to get those scouting assignments out to people. I promise. Mazakine, I will get the scouting assignments out. I promise. Also, if you support the Total Soccer Show at $10 a month or more, we guarantee to answer a listener question a month from you. Tomorrow's show will be listener question-tastic because we've had some great listener questions come in recently.
I'm looking forward to it.
So thank you to everybody, and Taylor Rockwell, thank you to you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and as always, Indented Centre is out, always 1-0.